Welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your hosts, Evan Ginzburg, Mike Lano, and our very special guest this evening. Evan, would you like to introduce her?
Absolutely. But first, Mike Lano wanted to say something to the listeners. Mike?
Yeah, I sent you an email. That's okay. I wanted to apologize to everybody. I've had some family issues, some family members in the hospital, same as Scott Hall, heart attack, falling, breaking a hip, but this person was 96 and is surviving it. So I do apologize for the last couple of weeks. It's been spotty. I do want to just plug very quickly some friends, because later on we're going to be interviewing a book author, but Evan has an incredible guest to start the show. The Big Time Memories documentaries, they have their biggest upcoming season. There's some episodes yet to be filmed in it on Dr. Jerry Graham, Dusty Rhodes in Detroit, Dave Drayson's Scrapbook, second part, Kobo All-Stars, behind the scenes, all kinds of special episodes. Amazing. Earl Maynard, I'm going to be talking about him, but he has a brand new book, Earl, Mr. Universe Maynard, who was in China. I think he did a movie there, but we hope to get him on in a couple of weeks to promote his brand new book on his life that's available on Amazon. Russ, I'll let you introduce Ev, who's got our very first guest. We're so proud and pleased to have her.
Okay, so we are honored to have award-winning freelance animator, picture book writer, exhibition curator, and the executive producer of the beautiful film To the Bright Side, all the way from China, Yantong Zhu. I hope I pronounced that correctly. How are you, ma'am?
Hello.
Thank you.
Guys. Hello.
Hi.
Yes, my name is Yantong Zhu. I live in Beijing. I've never been to the US. So I'm really happy. I'm really happy to be invited online.
There you go. And please tell us about your history with animation. In America, we're very accustomed to Disney and we're very accustomed to Japanese anime, but you know, we're not well versed on Chinese animation. So tell us a little about your background, your history.
Okay. My films. I am a animation director, and my films was shown in the U.S. In New York several times actually. Yeah. I learned animation in Japan. Actually, I was a student in Tokyo University of the Arts. And then I went back to China 7 years ago and started to do my own work. Yes, I do several jobs as I am an independent animation director, and I also draw, illustrate. I am an illustrator, and I'm also a producer, and I curate animation festivals. So I do really a lot of different jobs. And my graduate work called My Milk Cup Cow was shown in a film festival called New York International Children's Film Festival seven years ago. And and now there is a new film which Ivan mentioned called To the Bright Side. And this film just won a grand prize feature film at this film festival.
I can see why. I saw the clip, and I can see why it won that award. It looks absolutely beautiful, and it's an anthology, right? It's a bunch of short films put together.
Yes,
fantastic.
Yes.
How did you find each one of the different...
Seven stories from 7 different directors and 7 different children's books. It's quite an achievement.
Yes. How did you find all the 7 directors?
So let me see. it's like the production company is called Benlai Pictures, and they are always looking for directors who can make films, like children's films. And I am a curator of a festival called Fenaki Beijing Animation Week, and this festival we connect a lot of animation directors, young directors, and independent directors. And they went to our festival, and then they told me to join their project. It's like I connected all the person with this festival. So then, that's why that's how I find these directors.
There you go. And I just want to say that every one of these short films into the bright side was drawn by hand. This is painstaking. This is old school, like Fantasia back in the Disney's prime
days. Each cell
days.
is a work of art. Each cell is a work of art. I'm blown away by what I saw, at least from the clips. So please tell us a little bit about the making of this.
I've emailed you to. Are you going to run the clip so we can see?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to get a little bit of information about what everyone is going to watch before we play it.
Super.
So I was just saying that it was very, very impressive. And what was the selection process for you to come up with the different how you chose the films?
Chose the films? You mean the original books?
Yes.
But it didn't choose. But it didn't choose by me, actually.
Oh.
It's like I connect the director and the production company, but the book is actually chosen by the producer, the co-producer. His name is Leo Wang, and he's maybe the main person who wants to make this film. But he is not a director or not. He's just a company owner. So he connected us, and I think how he choose these books. It's like he likes these books very much, and he thinks that it can reflect some realities of China, Chinese families and Chinese societies as well. So it's like it's not only a Chinese, it's not only a children's book. It is something like have a second layer.
Wow, that's fantastic. Mike, do you want to ask a question before I play the clip?
Well, I want to know how because I too have been to Japan and on several tours there shooting sports, and it's my favorite place on earth. I've not had the privilege of going to China yet, but your English, people here in the United States, a lot are not even fluent in their own language, and your English is so good. How, when did you start and how and why to learn English? And I'm sure you might speak some other languages besides Chinese and or maybe Mandarin. Tell us about the languages you speak.
Languages. Oh, okay. I speak Mandarin. Yes, it's my mother tongue, and Japanese. I learned animation in Japan, so I speak Japanese. But English is like my third language.
Okay.
Like this. But
your English is strong. You're able to do an interview. I mean, it's excellent.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I do appreciate when you say that you're showing a slice of life of China and stories that are something that I think carry messages that are universal, not just for China, but for people who have families and children and so forth across the world. So very excited about that. And I'd like to play the clip for everyone now, if it's okay with you. So give me 1 second while I dial this up. Let's.
Would at some point you like to come to maybe a festival if it was needed, your appearance was needed in the United States? Do you have any desire to come here? And is that difficult? Do you have to go through a lot of paperwork, as I'm guessing, and permissions to come to the US?
Yes, and now it's like the pandemic, and our policy is not easy for us to go outside of the country because the pandemic policy. You have to when you go back to the country, it is maybe easy to go out, but if you go back to your country, you have to stay at a hotel, so for a long time. So
wow. Hey, folks, I figured out. I fixed the.
Yeah.
伯伯，你知道我的家长什么样吗？我的家啊，是有糯糯的甜饼和充满快乐的地方。
我向妈妈说起这件事情，已经是外婆去世很多年后了。
我是鸡腿超人。阿成，出来玩嘛！
街里街坊的，晚上总有人要喝糖水的嘛。
跟你说，我妈烧的菜最好吃了。
谢谢你，真的是幸福的味道。
你的哈气虽然有点臭，不过挺有用的。
妈妈，就算我长大了，也会一直和你在一起的。再过噻，快过后，我们就到家了。
So impressive. The audio adds, and the music and the sound effects, they add so much more. It was fantastic without the audio, but of course, many, many times greater with all of the audio elements.
Thank you for providing that for us, and it was an amazing clip. It must have been so hard to coordinate all those different stories together, so there was a thread between all of them. So did you find that to be a challenge working? Was that for everyone that worked on the film, was getting all those 7 films together a real challenge?
Yes, it's but like the title, the title is To the Bright Side, and I think that the 7 stories all share the same core, concept. Like the title. The title comes from a poem written by a Japanese poet called Misuzu Kaneko. She's famous for poetry for children, and she died very young in 1930s at the age of 27. But her works became very famous after she died. So if you watch the trailer and you can hear also the theme song, and the theme song is also based on the poem, her poem, and it is a song widely spread in primary schools and kindergartens in China.
Wow.
So it's like the song connector or the 7 stories.
Beautiful. And who are some of the animators that have influenced you? Who are some of the animators you've watched and enjoyed and been inspired by?
Inspired. Let's see, many, many. Because yes, it's like 7 different stories, and all 7 directors have their own style. So I think they all have their own like favorite films.
No, but what Evan was asking was for you. What
Yeah.
inspired you when you were younger, when you were starting out as an artist at the beginning? Who inspired you?
Me? Okay. I think my teacher, my professor in Japan inspired me a lot. His name is Koji Yamamura. He's a Oscar-nominated animation director, and his famous work is Mount Hand. And I watched his short film, and I started to think about to make my own film, and I just went to Japan to study with him. Yeah.
And you must be very proud that your film traveled around the world and won an award in New York. I mean, New York is one of the film capitals of the world, and you know, I'm sure you were very honored by To the Bright Side, you know, winning a festival right here.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm really happy to got this prize, but I cannot go to. It is very a pity that I cannot go to New York to receive the prize. Yeah.
Well, one day you can go to Los Angeles and win an Oscar for one of your films.
Yes,
the Academy Awards. So you'll make up for it. Don't worry, because it's beautiful work, and we're honored to have you. And please tell the viewers where they could find the film, where they could see the film, how they can keep in touch with you. Give out any URLs, websites.
Okay. Let me see. It's like the film. We are looking for opportunities to distribute it in North America. Now, maybe you can only see the film with a festival in festivals, but it's already shown in China. So it's like, and it is not online yet. So it's maybe it's difficult to watch it now. Yeah, but if somebody want to distribute the film, maybe you can simply send me an email or add me like Facebook. Yeah.
Can you let the viewers know what that is? Can you let the viewers know what your Facebook address and email are so they can contact you?
Yes, yes. But how to? I don't know how to send it.
You can post it on our Facebook page, the Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast page. But you could also just say it out loud to our fans, and they can rewind and play it back so they can type it in themselves.
I'm sorry. What do you mean?
Oh, I'm just saying that. Can you give us your email address?
Okay.
No,
okay.
Your website
or your website.
Any contact information where people can follow you, the film. Any contact information you'd like to give out.
Maybe Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe Instagram is better.
Okay, sure. What is it?
It's Yantong Zhu animation. So maybe I can copy paste it. But I don't know how.
Her name is spelled YANTONGZHU.
Like this?
Yes.
There you go. You got it. You got it. Perfect. Perfect.
Yes. And yeah, you can contact me with Instagram, and also Facebook. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And we want to also thank our mutual friend Sanjay for connecting us. Sanjay's very involved with supporting indie film, and we're very grateful to him to help arrange this tonight.
Yes, thank you, Sanjay.
And anything else you'd like to say to the viewers?
Oh, okay. I think this film is really different from today's Chinese animation, because nowadays Chinese animation really like to make mythology films, but this film is realistic, and I think it is not a film just for Chinese people, not only a film just for Chinese people, but also a common topic for human beings that everybody can enjoy. So, and it is made for children and families. So I hope you can have a chance to watch this film.
Okay, and we'll look forward to the bright side, and we'll look for your future work. Thank you so much for appearing on our show. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Very beautiful. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye. Good luck with the film.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Spectacular.
Wow. Well, that is something. Also, before we bring on the next guest, there's a couple of big celebrity passings that happen, and along with, the death of another friend of Evan's. So I wanted to have, in our unfortunately sad celebrity and friend remembrance moments. Would you like to say something about the friend that you had who passed, Evan?
Sure. Local indie wrestler who, by sheer coincidence, lived in my neighborhood, General Romero. Just a nice guy, and I'm not even sure of his age. I would say 40-ish. So another, friend who passed way too young. And I wish the wrestling media would give more attention and give some ink, some, just some play to the indie guys who pass, because a lot of times, it's barely acknowledged. So we like to do so on this show. I don't even know if the word "like" is appropriate, because it's always painful. But General Romero, just a good guy, and his real name George Rosario. And R.I.P. Man, we're on the road together off and on, and you guys know you're in a car and you're sharing some laughs and talking about
brothers. It's like a brother or family member.
Yeah. He did several of my old TV shows in studio, and we drive down to the studio together, and oh man. Anyway, I don't want to bring everybody down, but
no, but this is the time to give that sort of tribute to people that don't get talked about any other way. You're not going to hear about it in the news or the WWE or anything like that.
Any other show. So Evan is to be commended for.
Yeah.
Slam Wrestling does a good job acknowledging the indie guys and the old school guys and the the writers and the wrestling journalists. They do more than most. Most are fixated on a meaningless Raw or SmackDown doing their 5,000 words or whatnot. How do you say? I mean, how do you say crap in 5,000 words? You could say it in one. Unwatchable or whatnot. But
yes, that's true. Although
anyway,
everyone right now,
I don't want to take up too much time because we have another great guest coming up. But you wanted to mention Naomi Judd, I assume.
Yes,
that was right. And the cause of death, because now they're speculating, was it a possible suicide when you throw out that she was suffering from mental illness? And just, was it like a week and a half ago, she sang with her daughter, right on a big country award show. So very, that's way too young and total legend in that music genre.
Let me just briefly say, I've had 6 friends kill themselves over the years, 6, and each and every time it's just a knife in your heart because you wish you had done more, said more, been with them more, whatever the case may be, and sometimes they're 1,000 miles away, sometimes they're 3,000 miles away. It's not like you could move in with them and be a caretaker or whatnot, but suicide's epidemic in the United States, and COVID has not helped any with people feeling trapped and basically under house arrest off and on the past 2 years. So if a friend shows signs, look, depression is normal. You guys both lost parents. Depression is normal, but when you're in bed 14 hours or not making it to work or not doing what you're supposed to be doing, at some point as friends, be concerned and, be a good ear and be there for them. When people do my family is everything to me, friends are important too. So you need to make time. It's like a plant, a friendship you have to nurture. And, we don't want to lose any more good people. I'll never forget, and I'll wrap it up in 30 seconds because I know we have to get to our next guest. I'm in the gym one day and, you're furiously on the treadmill, on the bike, lifting weights, whatever the case may be. And I look up at the TV and Robin Williams just killed himself. Robin Williams. And I just say to myself, here's a guy who had all the money in the world, all the fame, all the talent, all the acknowledgement, all the popularity.
Disease, Llewellyn.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying.
You know what me and my daughter watched last night?
What's that?
Night at the Museum.
There you go. There you go.
So
but my point being, you can't just say somebody's quote unquote doing well because you never know what's going on.
That guy was Mr. San Francisco because I saw him in the club.
He went to my high school. High school.
Yeah, Holy City Zoo. But Russ knows Van Ness Street is one of the main drags in San Francisco, along with Market Street, which is kind of trashy. But Van Ness, I would see Robin Williams in his convertible.
Yeah.
He's 3 times.
His mother used to go buy art supplies at the store I worked in Tiburon. So he's in. They call it the Robin Williams Tunnel when you go. It's now renamed.
It's a Marin guy. But Holy City Zoo. That was his club, and people. There would be booked acts, and then he would sometimes just want to go in and do a set before theirs. It was like there was no way they could follow him. He was so brilliant. That was
he's super missed. He's like Roddy Piper. He's one of those people that I have a hard time putting in my head that he's gone. And Tom Petty. It's like I have a hard time visualizing those guys.
Prince. I can't wrap my head around Prince being gone 5 years later or whatnot. But anyway, let's get to our next guest because we don't
absolutely. Let me bring him on. Give me 1 second, gentlemen.
Meanwhile, Mike could adjust his camera because we're only seeing him from his nose up. There you go. Okay. No, now it's too high. Now, that's it.
Yeah, nobody wants to see me that close up. They could see Bull Ramus and Jimmy Lennon. I rewatched. I hadn't watched it in God knows how many years, 40 years. The Elliot Gould, George Siegel, Robert Altman film,
California Split.
Oh man!
Hello.
Great scene.
Oh, good evening. We're live on the air.
Steve, your camera's not on.
For Stephen Verrier, very important book, very long-awaited book by everyone who loves and appreciates wrestling history.
There you go.
Hey, there's Stephen. Man, what a book! Stephen Verrier. That's spelled Verrier. The book on George Gordienko. These, as Evan knows, because Evan's done X amount of books.
Mike, we're not seeing the cover, Mike.
Yeah, get me out of the way. Let's see.
We're seeing Bull Ramos covered in blood. We're not seeing the book.
Wait, there we go. I think I might just have to.
Except in reverse.
There you go, Steve. There you go.
Well, George Gordienko, Canadian wrestler, artist, and Renaissance man, with Bret Hart does the forward. That's amazing. Greg Oliver, too. There's a little bit of irony of those two guys doing the forward. Gordienko, perhaps trained by I mean, his story, so amazing, trained by Joe Pazendak and Stu Hart, won titles all over the world, had so much respect from the community. Let's get right into it. And Stephen, tell us about, you know, this required you to do a ton of research and work, as you are, you know, everybody respects you for doing that. What a person to do a book on. So tell us, maybe some of the young listeners don't know the incredible history of a Gordienko, his matches with Thez, and you know, just his history in Calgary, around the world. This guy was one of those world traveling, amazing athletes, real athlete.
Yeah, you know, I didn't know a lot about Gordienko myself until I started, you know, researching his life. I certainly knew the name. I associated his name with that, you know, C word, communism. I knew he made his name overseas as a result of, you know, problems with the U.S. government, especially in the 1950s. But, you know, somebody suggested that I write this book, and I thought about it. You know, I looked up bits about George's life, and soon it became obvious to me that, yeah, his is a story that definitely needs to be told. I mean, people generally don't remember him, at least in North America, the United States especially, and for good reason. But he was, first of all, an Olympic caliber athlete in wrestling and weightlifting. He chose instead to become a professional wrestler. He wanted to make a little money and get on with his life, and in fact support his art habit. From the time he was 12 years old, it was clear he wanted to be an artist above all else. That's what he considered himself, an artist in the making for a long time. But, you know, he took to professional wrestling under the wing, you could say, of Joe Pazendak at first. He got off to an amazing start. I mean, he was just a phenomenal wrestler of his age, in his late teens, in the late 1940s. You know, he was heading for the top, definitely. Lou Thez favored Gordienko as his successor in the mid-50s when Lou wanted to take a break from holding the title. I mean, Gordienko was just phenomenal, but as I said, he ran into some problems with the United States government. He admitted, you know, he made no secret of the fact that, yes, he had handed out some communist literature on the campus at the University of Minnesota. In fact, George had stepped away from wrestling already to take on some medical studies at university. But you know, that really shut him off from ever wrestling in the United States again, with a few exceptions that I get into in the book later in his career. But he was just a phenomenal guy that we don't know about, but everybody ought to. I mean,
how dare he assert his First Amendment rights by distributing communist literature on a college campus? It's, you know, God forbid he tried to open somebody's mind on a college campus.
When McCarthyism ended, and that was an ugly period of U.S. history, and so many artists, you know, more so from film, were really dragged through the mud, lost work, destroyed people and families and stuff. When that period passed, though, that sort of specter McCarthyism still prevented? Because that's, I guess, why the strap went to Dick Hutton. Instead of the deserved, and not that Hutton wasn't deserving, but Gordienko, I think, would have been a killer world champion. You can imagine the matches they could have had all over the U.S. with different folks. It would have been amazing.
Yeah, well, he certainly wouldn't be the mystery that he is to Americans had, you know, things played out differently. Yeah, you know, I get into the book concerning aspects of what it was exactly that kept him out of the United States. It was not just his you know, his little flirtation, you could say, with communism at the University of Minnesota, but a marriage gone bad and an ex-wife who made a point of telling authorities everything she could about George. And I'm not taking
Lovely,
sides as to the
lovely.
accusations, but George was up against the U.S. government, but even more, up against an angry ex-wife, and I think we can give her a lot of credit, if that's the word.
I'd rather take on the government.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as you say, George was Lou Thesz's choice of successor in 1956. Sam Muchnick, Strangler Lewis, and a few others got behind, George's case. But the government did not budge. George was excluded, and so, he took his career overseas, you could say.
They didn't have that kind of insanity going on in Canada at the time, so that might be why I wouldn't say it was like home based, but he did so much, won so many titles up there, which was a shame. How do some of the Canadian historians, etc., they must view him the way he properly should be, and the way you present him in this great book?
I think that's accurate. I mean, when you think Canadian historians, certainly you think of people like Vance Nevada. I would put Nathan Hatton up there as well. I mean, they are familiar with the art of grappling and the impact that Gordienko and other less colorful Canadian wrestlers, we could say, had on the sport. And yeah, I think they hold him in much the same esteem that I do, and that I think you do as well. I think those who had a chance to see him, those who didn't, but have some idea of his impact, especially in the prairies, just consider him one of the greats and kind of an unfortunate victim of circumstance.
And his legend, and I'll throw over to Evan, in Japan is probably second only to Canada, because the experts there, and there are many, and that is where history, like it is in Canada and in some parts of the U.S., not as many as it should be, but Japan, they really place a lot of importance on history and recognizing those super craftsmen and athletes. And this guy was, first and foremost, well, he was both, and then an artist, but what an athlete too. And not just having straps placed on him, but his physical prowess and everything else. I talked to Earl Maynard fairly often, and he spent quite a bit of time with Gordienko, and said he was the thickest, he was using today's vernacular, the thickest wrestler he ever worked against, and the toughest, even tougher than Thez. This is Maynard, who was a bodybuilder, wrestler, actor. But it's just a shame the U.S. was deprived. I mean, we didn't hardly get Whipper Watson in the States, maybe in Detroit, but there weren't, it wasn't like he was touring around. He wasn't in San Francisco or L.A., to my knowledge. Actually, no, I take that back. I'd have to go talk to Steve Yohe about Watson, at least in California, but not the amount of touring that you would think with some of these guys. Like Kiniski, obviously, globally known, and I guess Gene just kept his political thoughts to himself, or he didn't have to experience this. But that, just an ugly period. The U.S., some morons yet again deprived sports fans of seeing a great athlete, and this is the way to remedy this: to learn about George Gordienko, who was honored at the CAC, posthumously in 2009. But anyway, Ev, let me throw to you.
Okay. My big question: there are thousands and thousands of wrestlers throughout history, and George is not the most quote unquote, commercial property, or the best well-known wrestler. And knowing what goes into writing a book, the countless hours of writing, editing, research, production, what motivated you to say, out of all the wrestlers I could write about, George is the one I'm going to tackle? Because I'm sure it was a huge endeavor.
Yeah, I think what drew me to this project was the clear realization that he was not just a wrestler. I mean, you can say that about a lot of wrestlers, even somebody like Kiniski. I mean, he had many other interests, but Gordienko is in a class with very, very few. As I said, he considered himself an artist above all else. And it's as though he stuck out this lengthy wrestling career just to prepare himself for life as a full-time artist. There's that aspect. I mean, I also love writing about people who, don't have easy childhoods. And that certainly was the case with Gordienko during the Depression in North Winnipeg, his family's immigrant history. So it's just the fact that there is so much more. When I read a wrestling book, I don't want to read just about the wrestling. I mean, I love reading some of the other biographies about people like Andre and Bruiser and so on, books that get into a little more than just the wrestling. And it really was the fact that Gordienko was really, you're talking about history, I think, in many regards when you talk about his life, and I wanted to dig into that and present that to others who in some cases, I think would feel much the same way.
So for some of our fans who are looking forward to reading the book, do you talk about some of the best matches that he had, and can you tell us about some of the great matches?
Yes. In terms of the spectacle element, I think you've got to put his stadium match against Adnan Al-Kaisi at the top of the list. I mean, Adnan was, you could say, kind of exiled back in Iraq in the late 60s and early 70s. He was pressured to put on a wrestling show. He was certainly an acquaintance, if not a friend, of Saddam Hussein, who applied some of that pressure on his rise to I hate to say the top, but the top politically and in terms of being a strong man in Iraq. So Gordienko was brought in. He knew Adnan prior to that. They both had a history in the UK. And, George was brought in, touted as just, the greatest wrestler in the world. And, he and Adnan put on a show that drew certainly immense interest around Baghdad, but, to the degree possible at that time, you could probably say national interest in Iraq and in a few other Arab countries as well. That pretty much shut down Baghdad, as the match was going on. And it's just an amazing story. I spent a chapter of the book talking about that, but George filled stadiums in India, in New Zealand. He did a program with John De Silva, who passed away a few months ago, but through his daughter, I think I got a good sense of the friendship between George and John De Silva and how they worked on putting this program together and, again, filling a stadium. And, George's thing often was come into a country and build up a regional or national hero into somebody that people bought as the best wrestler in the world. He did that repeatedly. He filled stadiums in multiple countries. So I would say some of those matches where he certainly, he elevated somebody like John De Silva to the point where he was a national hero for the next decade. Wow. Those are George's strengths. And, other than Lou Thez, possibly, I think George did that more than any other wrestler in the world. I mean, he was considered the guy to hire if you had somebody you wanted to, to shoot to the moon, you could say.
There you go.
He had, wrestled from 46 to 76. A lot of folks in Canada remember him as Stu Hart's longtime tag partner, but he had the big match, I forget the city in Canada, in 53, but then he wrestled Thez to a 90-minute draw in Edmonton 2 years later in 55. Yeah. Enough said right there. When you look at the stuff that he did, I mean, at Royal Albert Hall, you're talking about filling the place. That's how big a name and respected he was. I'm just looking over a zillion titles, Ev. So, I mean, it's it's pro wrestling, but you don't put the title on these particular titles. NWA Canadian Heavyweight Champion, Vancouver's version of the NWA Pacific Coast Heavyweight title, NWA Canadian Tag Championship several times. And I'm sure the heart, I know you had Brett do the forward, but I don't know if you talked to Ross and Bruce, who were,
Yes.
the time Canadian historians, and I've had conversations with them about Gordienko in years past. They must have been so happy that this book is finally out.
Yeah, I talked to a number of Hearts, including Bruce and Ross, and definitely, I mean, they focused to a large degree, not just on the wrestling, but on George's friendship with Stu Hart. And what they saw as George's, just the strength of his character. I mean, he didn't stand for a lot of fooling around. He was in wrestling to, largely to make money, but to earn it by, putting on good, believable matches, even against somebody like Abdullah the Butcher, for example. I mean, George took his craft seriously. If he could wrestle a Billy Robinson, a Jeff Ports, or Albert Wall, or any number of good wrestlers, great. But if Stu or a promoter respectfully asked him to wrestle a certain type of match against an opponent who you would think would not gel well with George, well, amazingly, it usually did. I mean, George would take his assignment seriously as long as he was treated with respect. And I think that respect certainly came through when I talked to the Hearts as well.
Let me ask one last one. I'll throw back to the boys here. Where did he come up with, or why did he use the name Firpo Zbyszko in India?
Well, yeah, I get into that a little bit. I mean, yeah, he was gearing up to wrestle Dara Singh. And it went back to an old program between Stanislas Zbyszko and, oh my goodness, and, well, it would have been the Great Gama. So they were sort of piggybacking on that old feud. And so they brought in George, although he had wrestled in India earlier in his career, as I believe the nephew of Stanislas Zbyszko. They, adopted an old, pioneer and great wrestler, and they were just building on that storyline to make the most marketing-wise of the match between George and Dara Singh. It worked. I mean, they certainly sold out the stadium, and in fact, after that match, they took it to Zambia. They did the same thing. That match in Zambia, Firpo Zbyszko against Dara Singh, was in fact George's last match. It was in '75. He was invited to come back to India later on, but decided, no, I am 47 years old. I'm ready to be an artist. He'd suffered a serious injury a couple of years earlier. In fact, it was less than that. I mean, the year before his last match, and he just didn't want to take chances. But again, he became Firpo Zbyszko, sort of out of homage, you could say, to Stanislas, and it was a marketing attempt, and it worked.
In British Columbia, though, he used the name Flash Gordon. Was that an homage to the the popular, was it a 30s serial? What was the deal with Flash Gordon? I mean, it's just so funny because it's a name, George Gordienko, that sells itself. Why? That must have been, I'm guessing, early in his career.
Yeah, I don't know exactly why that name was chosen. I can explain, though, why he was not Gordienko at that time. And it's simply that he had a brother who did some refereeing for the promotion. His brother lived in Vancouver Island. I guess Sandor Kovacs, Kiniski Dono, and somebody thought that it was not good to have a wrestler who had the same name, the same last name as a referee. I mean, it didn't seem to bother anybody in Calgary. It hadn't bothered anybody in Vancouver when George wrestled as Gordienko a decade previous to his 1974 run. But it's just that, they thought, well, we better not have you with the same last name as the referee, so you're Flash Gordon, even though George seldom left the ground when he was wrestling.
Well, very similar to much later, decades later, in the AWA, although he started in Los Angeles for us, Bobby Bockwinkel, then becoming Robert Warren? So he used his dad's first name as his last name, Warren Bockwinkel, their father. Very similar. So when he's repping his brother Nick's matches, and he did not look at all like Nick, he had a mustache, folks would never have known, and they just wisely used a different name. But let me throw back to you guys. This guy was a total legend, working in, obviously, Canada, the Middle East, Australia, India, as we've discussed, South Africa, and other places. I mean, he really, if you want to know history, you're going to want to read George Gordienko by Stephen Verrier. Let me throw back to you guys before we tell people where to get this impressive book.
Before it gets too late, Dr. Mike told us that you're going to be doing a book on Wilbur Snyder.
Well, yeah, I haven't talked much about that yet, but Mike knows about it because, of course, when it comes to Southern California, Mike is a guy you definitely want to talk to. But yeah, I am co-writing a Wilbur Snyder biography. It's interesting. There are things I would have had no idea about. I enjoyed tracing his family history for a couple of hundred years before Wilbur came into the picture, and I brought up some things that, shall we say, a close relative of Wilbur was not at all aware of, and that was interesting. But yeah, Wilbur Snyder is next, and quite an amazing story as well.
There you go, buddy.
Do you watch any wrestling now? And if so, what do you watch?
I last night I watched a Defy show because it was being live streamed. So I stayed home. I watched a Defy card from Seattle, and I enjoyed it a lot. So I watch some of AEW. I watched some of New Japan. I noticed, for a time, they were showing New Japan reruns, so I, was not interested in watching that, but I noticed they're up to date again on, is it Access TV? So
they worked out their issues. There was heat between Impact and, well, more so on New Japan's part. They didn't want to be, a couple of years ago, continue on that channel or by sending their wrestlers to work for Impact. It was probably at a lower point for Impact, but it's like they bit their nose to spite their face, lost all of that, access, which would have helped. Had we not had a pandemic when they were starting to tour and gain traction in the U.S. But yeah, that's why I guess now it's been on for just about 6 weeks, thankfully back because of Tony Khan repairing the relationship. And now we're going to have that pay-per-view with AEW and New Japan and possibly some Impact wrestlers. So everything is copacetic. Did you watch, because they have we're talking about Bret Hart doing the forward for your George Gordienko book, and Martha has given permission to Tony Khan and AEW to have that Owen Hart tournament, and of course every show they send people to the Owen Hart Foundation, which is great, that website. But I hope you watch the AEW match with the two FTR tag partners Wednesday to open the show, which was an Owen Hart qualifier. It was impressive, and many people are saying those guys studied Bret Owens matches and did some homage to those two greats. So it's wonderful seeing this happen.
Yeah, I did see that match, and it was, impressive. Most of the wrestling that I see, I fast forward through. I'm probably referring more to Monday night and Friday if I get around to checking that.
You don't get to see any of that. Now, obviously, it's not Thez Robinson, Danny Hodge, Gagne stuff, or Stu or Gordienko, but AEW at least,
yeah.
For the style, that was a nice match for a one tribute. And bits and pieces. You're not going to see that on Monday or Friday, just as you said.
No, and if there is something good on Monday or Friday, often it's something you've seen recently. I mean, there's not much of that surprise element. AEW seems better at presenting matches that you didn't expect to see, I think we could say. So I enjoy even watching some of the older guys who came from the other company and showed up at AEW, and I cringe when I see people falling, off ladders in ways they probably didn't mean to, or I hope they didn't mean to. But as far as the strict wrestling is concerned, I've enjoyed some of the stuff on AEW in recent months. I mean, the Bryan Danielson, Hangman Page, and others. It's impressive.
Did you see that slap fest? Very impressive. Minoru Suzuki he was trained by Karl Gotch, so you can expect that with him. And I know Gotch. I've got to put those out there. I interviewed Gotch. The last couple of years of his life, he was devoted to his wife, who passed, and he was really in mourning. And I think that's what finally did him in, far too young. But he even talked about Gordienko and great respect. All of the guys we have great respect for, they all had great respect for George Gordienko.
Yeah, I was not aware of the Gotch Gordienko history prior to researching the book. In fact, it wasn't until I talked to Wayne Bridges before he passed away that I got a really good sense of the respect and friendship that Gotch and Gordienko had for each other. I mean, they were not rivals in the ring, but each one was aware of what the other was able to do, and they were good friends. I mean, they met from time to time, even though if you look at results, you don't see their names together. There's so much about Gordienko I had no idea about, and his friendship with Gotch was one detail that I found very interesting.
And please tell the viewers how we could get your book and keep in touch with you, and any contact information you'd like to give out.
Yes. Well, the easiest way to get the book, I guess, is to go to Amazon. Just you can check George Gordienko book or Stephen Verrier, anything like that. And if you just do a search of the book, you'll come up with multiple places where you can pick up the book. But Amazon is
Can you hold up the book again so everyone can see the title?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Yeah. It doesn't work, Mike. Your green screen doesn't work.
It's kind of backwards, at least from my vantage point.
No, it looks forwards to us.
Yeah, that's right. That's good.
Okay.
Great. That's wonderful.
On drama, fiction, nonfiction, of course, his first wrestling book. They're published in the U.S., Canada, and Japan. Just amazing. And this is a quality book that belongs in everybody's library. If you're a historian of wrestling, if you love, the guys that really set the standards for excellence as athletes, and this man also, with his artistry that you'll read about here, and as Eva says, right in the title, Renaissance Man, and I know that's the co-title, Canadian Wrestler, Artist, and Renaissance Man. And Stephen, you've done a terrific job as always, and congrats. If you want us to clip out that part in kayfabe, the Wilbur Snyder stuff, the Weaselbur, we can do that.
I think it's fine. I don't think I revealed anything I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, it's a tease. It gets people interested.
And can you give your contact information so that fans could find you on the internet or your social media?
Sure. Well, you can check StephenVerrier.com. Again, it's Stephen with a V, and then Verrier is Verrier. You can check Stephen Verrier on Facebook. I think I will pop up immediately, and I can be reached at StephenVerrier@gmail.com, and we'd be glad to discuss Gordienko or whatever with anybody who's interested.
Thank you so much.
Real history. And guys, this was a class athlete. Everybody should know about it. Everybody should have this book.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And that's it for this week. We'll see everyone next week. Good night, everyone.
Kombate kudasai.